Mattia Binotto is back and he is on the rampage. He has been talking to Italian media about Lewis Hamilton's move to Ferrari. What he had to say doesn't sound positive. Here we go. So, speaking to Corriere della Sera in Italy, Mattia Binotto had this to say in response to, would you have signed Lewis Hamilton if you were still at Ferrari? He says, no. But he did very well to go to Ferrari. I agree with his decision. Because Ferrari had set their sights on other drivers, and if the talent is Leclerc, he is the one who somehow, I think, should be taken to the target. Okay, let's break that down a little bit. So, Mattia has basically said two things here. From what I understand it, he has basically said this is good for Lewis, but it's not necessarily good for Ferrari and maybe not good for Charles Leclerc. Let's have a look at both those two statements, right? So is it good for Lewis? Well, let's have a think about this from the point at which Lewis made the decision. Okay, it's in January 2024 is when the decision was announced and Lewis was going to Ferrari. At that point, Mercedes were still in preseason testing. The Mercedes came out, we went racing, and the Merc was nowhere. And at the same time, the Ferrari is out there winning races in Carlos Sainz's hands. He won the Australian Grand Prix. So from a pure performance point of view, it absolutely made sense. But from an even deeper, more political, more family orientated point of view, it made sense. The story being that Lewis had wanted a longer term deal at Mercedes. Toto Wolff was not happy to give him anything longer than a 1 year deal, supposedly because he knew that young Kimi Antonelli was about to be the next big thing in F2 and really was the future of the team. So Lewis saw the writing on the wall and said, look, I'm going to jump ship before I'm kicked out. And he went for a big fat money deal to Ferrari, who had a better car at the time. So kind of makes sense for Lewis, doesn't it? They're not really seeing you as their future at Mercedes, whereas at Ferrari, they're willing to put you on a multi-year deal. They're willing to make you an ambassador. They're willing to give you a huge heap of money to go and drive for them. So I think from that point of view, Mattia is right. I think it makes sense for Lewis to go to Ferrari. And I think even in the context of the way the rest of the season has panned out, although Mercedes had that mid-season drive where they suddenly became the team to beat for a couple of races at least, and Lewis, emotionally won the British Grand Prix and then won the Belgian Grand Prix, maybe not on the road, but certainly in the results afterwards. It seemed that Mercedes were on the up, but Ferrari have since had a bit of a resurgence since they've understood their new floor and how to get the most out of it and try and prevent the bouncing that they've had from it. Whereas Merck seemed to have lost that understanding a little bit. So yeah, I think it makes sense. But let's have a look at the other part of what Mattia was talking about. Now he's kind of intimated that although it might be a good move for Lewis, it's maybe not such a good move for Ferrari and maybe not for Charles Leclerc. So let's have a look at that on its merits. So from a is it a bad move point of view? Well, Lewis is a seven-time world champion, even against George Russell, who has pretty much taken him to the cleaners this year when it comes to qualifying. He's ahead of Russell in the points, has more wins than George Russell, and you'd have to say in the races has kind of had the edge on most weekends. And if you look back across their last couple of seasons together, 22 and 23, in qualifying, Lewis has been ahead or equal in both of those seasons, and it's 1-1 essentially in terms of championship outcomes in those seasons. So, although George Russell has done really, really well, it's the narrative I think has become very much a George has done very well against Lewis, as opposed to Lewis is struggling against George Russell. I think Lewis has probably overall, if you had to put money on it, you'd have to say he's had the better of him. But it's been tight. So if we then take that across to Ferrari, Lewis isn't going to suddenly be a pushover for Charles. I don't think that's going to be an easy one for him to just come in and Charles just going to easily steamroller him. I think there'll be a big fat challenge. I would be disappointed. I think most of us would be if that weren't the case. But Lewis also goes there with a desire. He really wants to win that eighth title. He's not going to Ferrari just to retire, just to fill the coffers one last time before he hangs up his helmet. It seems to be a genuine desire that the performance that is on offer at Ferrari will provide him with the title, but that puts him at odds with Charles Leclerc, who up until now has essentially been Ferrari's top dog. They've given him a long-term deal with the express aim of making him a world champion. So how can you have both of those things? That's where that story falls apart a little bit. How can you have two alphas in the team without the team falling apart? And Lewis is no stranger to that. He's been in a team before where lines of communication have broken down. 2014 to 2016 against Nico Rosberg, it was not plain sailing. Is that what Ferrari are letting themselves in for again? Lewis's fans. I think my friend Ammar is going to talk a little bit about his worries about how the Hamilton fandom is going to affect Ferrari, and I would say that actually Team LH versus the Tifosi and the Italian media in general are going to butt heads. I don't think that's going to be particularly pretty, because if the combo doesn't perform, you can absolutely guarantee that both sides will blame the other, and that will just lead to disharmony within that team. So those are the things why I think it might be less than optimal for Ferrari. But look, I came into the beginning of this season thinking this is a great move. I think this is going to potentially be the making of both Ferrari, Charles, and Lewis Hamilton. I think it will be absolutely brilliant. And my reasons for that are pretty unchanged. I think the best way for a team, one, to win the constructors, and second to really show that they have their house in order, is to have two alphas in their team. Lewis and Charles, I think the way that you see them from the outset now, they seem pretty respectful. Even when Carlos has had the upper hand against Charles. Charles never become angry or blamed the car or blamed the team for not favoring him. He's gone back into himself, worked out what needs to happen, and then pushed himself and the team, which I think is really to his credit, pushed the team to get behind him and upped his own performances in response, so that they're once again a combo to be reckoned with. So I don't think Charles will just get pushed over. And by the same token, Lewis is the kind of driver that understands what it takes for a team to be a multiple world champion, what he needs from himself to do that, how to interact both with himself and his teammate to get the most out of themselves. The lessons that he learned in 2016, I think, mean that he is no longer that driver, and hasn't been for a number of years now. Ever since he had that sort of chastening experience where his teammates psychologically got under his skin, he's not the kind of driver that would let that happen to himself again. And I don't see Charles as the kind of driver that would want to do that either. They both seem like drivers that want to do their talking on track. Yes, they will push the team hard to get what they want out of the car, to get what the direction that they want, to get the calls that they want. But I don't see them as being underhand in that. They will do everything they can performance-wise to get themselves into a position to make it so that the team has no choice. You can't really blame a Formula One driver for doing that. And where people will argue that having two alphas on the team constantly will, you know, the precedents in the past suggest that that doesn't work. And you look at 2007, you look at 1986. I would argue that actually, in most circumstances, when you have two drivers that are really, really good and a team that is able to win races, by and large, a driver from that team wins. Um, you look back at 2010 when you had Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber both in the team. Yes, you could argue that Sebastian Vettel was a better driver, but actually that season both of them were pretty close. Both of them were vying for the championship, and one of the Red Bull drivers did win the championship. If you look back to 1988, Senna and Prost. 1989, Senna and Prost. You look back to 2014 to 2016, Lewis and Nico. One of them won the title. There are plenty, I think, of examples where a team has had two really good drivers, and if they build a car good enough, then one of those drivers invariably will win the championship. And it would be a testament to Ferrari that they are able to make that happen. And I think under Fred Vasseur, that's probably worth it as well. So let's go back to that question again. Mattia asking, would you have signed Lewis Hamilton? He says, no, it would be good for Lewis. It would not be good for Ferrari. My answer to that question is, I agree with you, Mattia. It would be good for Lewis. But I think this could well be the making of Ferrari in the 21st century as well. There you have it. As usual, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. I'll read every single one of them and we will reply to as many as we possibly can. And we will keep doing a few more of these videos over the course of this week, leading up to the US Grand Prix, which we cannot wait for. See you guys in the next one.